Good afternoon, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. Hello, everyone. My name is Sharon Stroy. I am the Director of Public Engagement in the School of Public Affairs and Administration. I want to welcome you to our first event for the fall 2021 semester. We also want to welcome back our students on campus. After 18 months of living in COVID, it is nice to see the energy and the excitement of the students in and out of the SPA building. Before I get started, I would like to take a moment to read a land acknowledgement. I begin this acknowledgement with the fact that I am not an Indigenous person, and I want to pay homage to the original inhabitants of this land. We gather today from many locations, but for those individuals physically located in Newark, New Jersey, where Rutgers University Newark is located, we acknowledge that we are in the traditional territory of the Lenni Lenape indigenous people, the indigenous people of the land. We honor the Lenape tribal communities that still remain in their homeland and those of the diaspora that were forced to migrate away. We respectfully acknowledge that from ancient times, the Lenape and other indigenous tribes have relationship with the lands and waters across this country. And we pause to show our respect for their ancestors who lived here before, the indigenous people today, and their generations to come. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Dean Charles Menefield, the faculty, staff, students, and the Office of Public Engagement, we want to welcome you to our continuing celebration of the 15 years that School of Public Affairs and Administration has been in existence. We also want to acknowledge the 75th year of Rutgers University Newark. But at this moment, we also want to pay homage to this month, Hispanic Heritage Month. We want to pay homage in a small token to our Hispanic, Latino, Latinx sisters and brothers across this country and across the globe. It is my pleasure to introduce our discussion tonight, creating a pipeline in executive leaders in nonprofit organizations. Tonight, you will hear from faculty, students, alumni, and community partners all in one setting that are considered, as our dean says, SPA family. At this time, I would like to introduce our panel, then introduce our moderator, who will take over for this evening. Our first panelist is Dr. Leonard Camarena. She is an assistant professor in the School of Public Affairs and Administration at Rutgers University Newark. Her research agenda addresses both established and emerging issues related to public engagement, nonprofit management, and local government. Her research focused broadly on representation, leadership, gender, and diversity in public and nonprofit organizations. Dr. Camarena is published in the following journals: the Review of Public Personnel Administration, Local Government Studies, and Nonprofit and Voluntary Sector Quarterly. Prior to entering the academy, Dr. Camarena worked as a policy analyst at Chicanos por la Causa, Inc., a 501c3 community development corporation in Arizona. Professor Camarena earned multiple degrees from Arizona State University, a PhD in public administration and public policy, a master's in public administration, and undergraduate degrees in public service and public policy, urban and metropolitan studies. We want to welcome Dr. Leonard Camarena. Our next panelist is Victoria Fernandez. Victoria is the acting executive director of the Institute for Ethical Leadership, a research center housed in Rutgers Business School, Newark. She is an experienced nonprofit leader with a background particularly focused on program development, community engagement, and effective management. In her evolving role at the Institute, Vicky, as she is famously called, has helped hundreds of nonprofit leaders from the greater Newark area and beyond to develop and find support through a variety of Institute programs and initiatives. Her proudest achievement with the IEL Institute is increasing programming practice around access, diversity, equity, and anti-racism. In 2019, Vicky co-founded what would become the Nonprofit Professionals of Color Collective, The Collective, with IEL alumni Tanisha Gibbs of 144th and Vine, LLC. The collective seeks to support the whole leader with professional and personal development, plus resources focused on the needs of people of color nonprofit leaders. Together with a trust-based approach of support from the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation and Dodge Technical Assistant Manager Judy Kim, the collective has grown to reach over 800 nonprofit professionals of color since its inception. Much of the collective's growth came from pivoting into virtual programming. The online format has allowed increased participation from leaders across the world. Prior to joining the Institute for Ethical Leadership, Vicky worked at WBGO Jazz radio station, initially coming to Newark to study at the School of Public Affairs and Administration. Vicky completed her MPA in 2012 with a concentration in nonprofit administration and a capstone on marketing in the public sector. She earned her bachelor's degree at Ramapo College, where she majored in communications and fine arts. Our final panelist is Carlos Valentine Jr. Carlos currently serves as the executive director of Hispanic Inc. of New Jersey. With a professional background in the nonprofit, political, and government sectors, Carlos began working extensively with nonprofit organizations starting in the mid-1990s. As an advocate for the underserved, a proponent for youth empowerment, civic engagement, and advocacy, as well as effective juvenile justice and alternatives, Carlos has dedicated his entire life and career in providing opportunities and resources locally and statewide. Since the beginning, Carlos' connection to Experience was firmly entrenched with the organization, first as an Esperante, serving both as a member of the board and as a student representative for New Jersey. Today, he has a staff of 30 employees while overseeing a multi-million-dollar budget serving thousands of youth and families annually. During his leadership, Carlos has generated millions of dollars in grant and donation support for programming and community-based initiatives and services. In the realm of higher education, Carlos continues to successfully manage the Aspira Scholarship Fund, which has awarded thousands in scholarships to matriculating high school students from various school districts. The program has supported dozens of young people who have attended the Ivy League private and public institutions. A proud Puerto Rican man and Newarker, Carlos attended Newark Public Schools, graduated from Science High School, earning a bachelor's degree in public and nonprofit administration. And Carlos is currently completing his master's degree in our executive MPA program. I want to take a moment to welcome our panelists. My last introduction is our moderator for this evening. Anna Ogabasti is a current MPA student in the School of Public Affairs and Administration. She is also the founder and president of We Are the Voice International, an organization with the mission to bridge the gap between social media activism and traditional activism, and its secondary mission of uniting and amplifying the voices of the youth in politics. We Are the Voice currently operates in 3 different countries. She is also the co-chair and student representative of the Rutgers University Climate Task Force and a member of the Agricultural, Food, and Water Systems Committee, and has represented Rutgers University at the Global Initiative Program. Anna has served as the 2020-21 president of PAGA, Public Administration Graduate Association in SPA. Anna has dedicated her time traveling around the country, advocating, attending, and speaking at events, galas, and conferences, such as the United Nations Commission on Women Conference in 2019 and the 2019 Social Equity Leadership Conference that was held right here at Rutgers University North. Anna enjoys connecting with people of various cultures to learn and be inspired by their stories. She is also recognized throughout the country, honored with the Congressional and Senatorial Recognition Awards due to her humanitarian efforts in the United States and abroad. She has received multiple acknowledgements from several cities in Michigan, like the City of Dearborn Citation, the Spirit of Detroit Award. She has also received the State of Michigan Special Tribute of Humanitarian Efforts. In May 2020, Anna was awarded the Rutgers Class of 1962 Presidential Public Service Award in recognition for distinguished and non-compensated services. Anna completed her undergraduate degree in public and nonprofit administration and is currently, as I stated, a MPA student. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, a state, national, and international humanitarian for this evening. Anna and the panelists, have a great session.
Thank you so much, Director Stroy. That was amazing. I just feel like I'm in a room with such powerful people, and I'm so honored to be a moderator today. Thank you so much, SPA. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Director, for the opportunity. So we're going to definitely dive deep into the questions, and some of the questions I can definitely relate to, so I'll be probably asking some follow-up questions. However, let's just begin with the first question. My first question is to you all, and anybody can go first, it doesn't really matter. But my first question to you all is, what is the motivating factor of selecting your career?
I can go first,
Yes.
if you mind. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for inviting me here, Dean Menafield and Director Stroy. The motivating factor in selecting my career has to be my upbringing. Growing up in Newark, New Jersey, I always believed in the most important capital in the city, its people. I saw many smart and talented people not fulfill their potential simply because they didn't have the opportunity. Now, the opportunity may not have been there for a variety of reasons besides not just being available. Sometimes people had to take on extra responsibilities to help their families. Other times, they just simply made a mistake that had repercussions that would impact the trajectory of their lives. Unfortunately, there were others who were simply at the wrong place at the wrong time. As I embarked on my career, I knew that I wanted to help people. I ended up being involved in government and felt that this would be a good way to help my community. However, I learned that in order to get things done in government, I would have to navigate a lot of layers of bureaucracy, and the process takes time. However, my experience in dealing with the nonprofit sector, I learned that if I can develop a program to address an issue and raise the funding necessary to operate it, then I can impact the community much faster and more directly. And that's one of the biggest factors in me deciding to work in the nonprofit sector.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And I guess, Vicky, you can go next.
Sure. Before I answer the question, I just want to do two things. First, visual descriptor. I'm a fat, mixed ethnicity Latino with white skin, blue glasses, lots of pink behind me, and a fabulous banner that says Make Jefe Move. I'm also wearing a necklace from the wonderful Glass Roots, a nonprofit right around the corner from SPA. And the other thing I want to share is that I'm so appreciative that I heard the land acknowledgement earlier today. Something we're doing with the Nonprofit Professionals of Color Collective is also amplifying the voices of Indigenous people. And if it's okay, I hope to share that information with everyone here. This is an organization that is currently doing work in the United States. It's the Lakota People's Law Project. So I'd like to share that with everyone here today. And I encourage you to check out their website and some of the work that they're doing today. So my motivating factors for getting involved in the nonprofit sector echo Carlos's responses. As someone growing up in Elizabeth, being about 10 years old, and a lot of my friends were moving out of town. And I didn't understand why they were moving out of town. My parents explained to me, as there were growing challenges around crime in the neighborhoods, more young people being impacted by those crimes, their families were concerned in moving away. And in my mind, I thought, well, why aren't they staying here to do something about it as opposed to leaving? And at that very early age, I thought I want to be more a part of the solution than the problem. I want to be someone who stays and does something. The motivating factor behind the recent work I've been doing with the Nonprofit Professionals of Color Collective was just my own experience and the experiences of my colleagues and friends. I think so often when you're in this sector, you tend to have a circle also in the sector of friends who are experiencing some of the same things that you are. And as we're hanging out at night, we're lamenting about the same experiences as people of color and what the challenges of the nonprofit industrial complex and just working in organizations where we maybe weren't appreciated, we're underrepresented, or maybe dealing with extreme bias or racism. So the collective was a chance for people to come together and to share those experiences in a safe space.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Professor, you are the last one to go.
No, thank you. I appreciate being invited to be a part of this fantastic panel. First, as Vicky had done also, I am Dr. Leonard Camarena. I identify as a Chicana, and I come from Arizona. So this is actually the first time that I'm in New Jersey within the last 2 years when I first arrived here. So I am learning very quickly everything that I can about New Jersey and all of its wonderful people. I do acknowledge that the indigenous population where I'm from is the Pascoyaqui Nation and the Navajo Nation. And I really, my whole career to land to where I'm at right now came from my interest in public service. I knew I wanted to do something in that area. I didn't know what. And I was very fortunate to get an internship with Chicanos por la Causa during the end of my undergraduate time at Arizona State. And through that experience, it was developed because there was a recognition that we were going to need new voices and generations in the nonprofit sector, specifically in the executive level. And so it was a move that was originated in California to try and bring young voices into these nonprofit organizations because they needed a new direction. I was very fortunate. Chicanos por la Causa is one of, if not one of the largest Hispanic nonprofits on the West Coast. They have an increasingly large footprint in the Southwest community where they're continuing to grow across many states, across not just Arizona. And through that, I was able to get hired on afterwards as a business specialist, working within, real estate and helping them with their community development corporation footprint. As I was doing that, I was finishing my MPA, and I realized that I wanted to do more, and my MPA was going to let me become a policy analyst and a program evaluator for them. And while I was there, I did board presentations and I met with many individuals, and I recognized, while I was very fortunate to be in a nonprofit with many Hispanics and Chicanos, there were very few women in leadership positions. The board comprised of maybe 2 women out of the majority, and there was only at that time 2 women on the executive team. And I realized then that, even with being in a Hispanic organization, that I was really interested and invested in the voices of other Latinas or Chicanas that were interested in becoming leaders. And so that really propelled my interest in researching gender representation and representation generally of people who are underrepresented in these organizations. So through my experience as a practitioner, it really led into my interest right now as a researcher and as a professor here at SPA.
Thank you so much. I just feel like I am in a space with such, like I said, powerful people, because the person that I can somehow, part of my story of why I decided to create We Are the Voice International was because Vicky said, why are people moving away from this particular conversation? Let's actually have it and find out if there's a solution in our methods of speaking or even relating to one another. And like Carlos said, where he's like, I can have, a more direct impact to the community, which is something that I was also looking to doing. So, and Vicky saying that, sorry, Professor saying that she basically grew and through her internship. And the funny thing is that We Are the Voice International also started with an inspiration from an internship that I had with a very powerful woman called Bonnie Kernes on the Prison Watch program. So I just feel like, wow, like I can pick a point of my story amongst all of you. And I am actually very excited right now because I feel like I am about to learn so much, not just to push forward, what I'm doing in my organization, but also to push forward the mission of SPA, as well as, impact more people, with the mindset of their voices matters. So I'm going to go into our next question. And if you have any follow-up points, just please do not hesitate. This is our space. This is for ourselves and for our audience. We're not forgetting y'all. So if you all have any questions, you can put it in the chat. Our panel, if you have any questions, even to another panel, don't worry, just lift up your voice, or you can use the reaction to just lift up your hand and we would take it from there. So my next question is, what has been the benefit of completing your graduate degree and aligning to your career trajectory?
I can go first on this one. I can say that getting my MPA was really a ticket in the door for so many different opportunities for myself. I think it was an opportunity to be taken seriously and to stand out. I don't know that I would have gotten some of the opportunities I had if it wasn't for the fact that I had my MPA. So I think it's a ticket, it's a key to unlock a lot of doors. And then from like a practical standpoint, in the actual utilization of the knowledge I gained, it provided some greater insights to what I was already seeing in the sector and gave me a bigger context to understand not only what I was seeing anecdotally, but to put some theory behind it. And that was super beneficial, so that as I was encountering those same phenomenon in the future, after I got my degree, I was able to better make connections to the work I was doing.
Thank you so much. I guess Professor Camarena, you can go next.
Sure. Well, kind of going back, when I was in the nonprofit, I realized that in order for me to have more opportunity just within CPLC where I was at, I was going to need my MPA. Where I was at, MBAs were the thing. Most of the people I worked with were shooting for the MBA. And it was just by pure luck that I accidentally clicked on MPA on the website, and I was like, oh, this can actually feed into a lot of public service roles, and I want to do public service. And so that afforded me the opportunity to apply to the position within the nonprofit. I also think just, having a graduate degree opens so many doors for you, not even considering, where I'm at right now. It just means that, one, you have the ability to also advocate for yourself to get a higher salary in certain locations. You also have some bit of expertise behind you that says, like, yes, I do know these topics, and yes, I understand the bigger picture here. My PhD was a complete and total luck. I had a professor who saw a lot of potential in me, and he introduced me to somebody who became my advisor. And I think in talking about representation and the Hispanic community, for those of you that are unaware, from 2019, only 7.1% of individuals with doctorates are Hispanics. And of that, only 2% are women. And that is a substantial drop from the majority of other, race and ethnic groups in the United States. And I think an important thing to recognize also is that many nonprofits are also universities. Rutgers is a nonprofit organization. So when talking about people in leadership and executive roles, it's also important to look at the individuals who are directors and deans and even presidents of the university. And if you look at that and you're trying to look at the Hispanic makeup on those individuals, it's considerably less than that as well. So I really think that, one, my ability to be here at Rutgers and at SPA generally is, to me, a representation of what we have the ability to become and how much more we can grow as well.
Definitely, I agree with you. And I guess we'll end with Carlos.
Well, with regards to me, I'm in a unique situation because I've been an executive director for the past 15 years at Aspida of New Jersey, but I'm also currently a student going for my MPA. So what I've been able to do is utilize what we've been working into what I do every day. One of the things that's interesting about it, though, is we've been learning a lot of things that weren't necessarily big issues back when I started that have become bigger issues in the sector today. For example, technology. One of the things we did in some of our coursework is examining different technologies and the impact that it has on communities, whether it be basic functionings of nonprofit organizations to emergency disaster management. So that's been something that we looked at as well. One of the other things that we looked at is social media impact in terms of outreach and reaching donors and spreading the message. And that wasn't necessarily prevalent when I first became executive director 15 years ago. So I've really been able to appreciate that and apply that from my coursework. So hopefully be graduating next year, and looking forward to applying it even further with some of the other things we go over.
Yes, yes, definitely. And frankly speaking, as a current student, I think one of the main questions that I pounded on was, what can the MPA do for me that that can basically push me forward? Because I meet a lot of people in my area of work, and it's awesome that I get to meet people of from different countries. So I get to really understand what they are, facing within their nations. And unfortunately, I'm really, really focused on my continent, Africa, a lot. But I think like this particular meeting right now has just clicked. And has allowed me to pretty much refocus myself and say, what if we can have Hispanics even represent themselves, and we are the Voice International. And I think that is the kind of mindset that everybody everywhere must have, is that if we're lacking a representation, we must be more than happy to have them in that space, teaching us, training us, educating us, to in order to understand them, and also be a push and not a pull towards their impact. So looking at the MPA program already, it's already opening amazing doors for me. Even more so, just being able to manage people from different countries, I never saw that coming. But the MPA program is already, I'm not done yet, but it is already giving me tools, access, information, like Vicky said, the big picture. It was like I was opening like a book of gold, where I was like, oh wow, I did not know all of this existed. And mind you, I did do my undergrad in spot, so I feel like I had all the information, and it's just like, no, you did not. You don't have a clue as to how bigger it could get. And I'm glad that I am in that position as well. So thank you so much for your answers to that second question. So my third question for you is, why is it important to have, and I feel like we already really touched on this, so I'm happy this is low-key like a follow-up question, but it is, why is it important to have gender and or ethnic representation in the nonprofit sector?
I can go ahead and jump first on that one, since I feel like we've all taken turns going first. I mean, more or less, my research is really focused on this gender aspect primarily, but I think the important thing when we're talking about representation is also to talk about inclusion. And I think really what we're getting at today, where we're at, is being inclusive and including multiple voices. And for a long time, not just with the Hispanic community, but any underrepresented community, really, representation matters, because inclusion and the ability to hear other voices has not been heard. And so I think with that comes a sense of ignorance of not understanding maybe our culture or how we do things, or in the sense of even how we think and how we put certain values on certain items. At least for me and my family, like family is number one. For many Hispanic, other ethnic groups, like that comes first. And I think we've noticed with this pandemic that there's been a significant drop within, enrollment in schools and stuff, because more or less, we're very, very close with our family, and we want to take care of everyone and contribute as best we can. So having representation just generally, even outside of the nonprofit sector, is important, just because the opportunity is there. And I think it's important to recognize that just because we may not see it as a majority doesn't mean it's not possible. And so being able to be inclusive and seeing a representative group of individuals, in particular Hispanics, like as this roundtable is focused on, just goes to show that our voice is being heard, and that our way of thinking and our values and how we organize ourselves is also being understood by the greater collective as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that response. I'm not going to say who goes next. You got it.
Sure. I mean, I'll tackle this one. I would definitely push for the representation being important because of service delivery, especially in the Latino communities and in particular amongst undocumented families. I mean, there's a general distrust of the system or even of professionals as a whole. A lot of undocumented members of our community are afraid to go to things such as City Hall or even go into their doctors for preventative care out of fear of being reported and deported. And that's a general fear that really got exacerbated over the last few years. And it's pushed a lot of our families kind of to stay in and to not seek services that they so desperately need to be able to provide for their families. So I think when you're a nonprofit and you're providing services to the community that has these types of fears, it's important that they feel comfortable, at least that there's representation there, that they know that understands the realities that they're facing in order to provide a much more seamless service delivery.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree. Oh, Vicky?
Yeah, I'm glad Carlos really mentioned that cultural competence. That's so important when we have representation at the head of an organization. I also want to point out that so often organizations are serving Latinx populations, but they're not representative of them. And that's a concern not only for our community, but so many other historically excluded communities and identities when it comes to nonprofit organizations and the leadership of these organizations, not only when it comes to the people who are doing the work on the ground, but at the executive level and also at the board level, because so much of what happens in the nonprofit sector is really dictated by that upper management. And if the upper management doesn't understand and doesn't, it really does impact what's happening on the ground. I also want to just say the importance of intersectional identities is so important to what we're doing because people are complex, they're layered, they're multifaceted. I mentioned when I did my visual description that I identify as fat physically and politically, part of my identity. And so when I talk about intersectionality, that is something I think about. There are also people who are dealing with chronic illness and disability, or they are part of the LGBTQIA population, et cetera. It's so important for us to see not only the Latina, but also to see the Latino who may also be disabled or who may also be a part of these other historically represented communities, and to understand that we are not a monolith as a community. So it's not just about having the one token Latina on your board. It's not just about having the one token Latino in your office and they're going to be able to get it for all the people. You know, the experience is different. We already talked here today. We have someone who identifies as Mexican, someone who identifies as Puerto Rican, and I identify as Dominican. So our experiences are going to be different. We can't even agree on what to call the rice that's stuck to the bottom of the pot, you know, the same thing. So we're all going to have something different to bring to the table within an organization. So representation really needs to be bigger than just about a checkbox, but really, as our professor here said, it's really about inclusion and getting all the voices in. I see also there's a comment in the chat from our dean, and he's given the big push for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the need for diverse leadership. What would you say to students of color who are currently matriculating in public administration programs? And I'm happy to just jump in and say, I think I would recommend, there's a great book called Black Faces in White Places. It was written by a Rutgers faculty member at the business school, Jeffrey Robinson, in a partnership with Randall Pinkett, both doctors who have done extensive research about this experience of being people of color in predominantly white institutions. And one great gem that they mention in their book is making sure that you have a group of diverse mentors working with you. So if you're in a program, this is a great opportunity for you to find advisors, whether it's from the faculty members who are teaching you, or it's asking them directly for connections to other people in the sector who could be potential mentors to you. So making sure that you have a diverse set of homogenous leaders, these authors found have helped people to reach executive levels in their careers. as opposed to people who had homogenous, whether it be all white or all mentorship, who were only able to reach a certain level in their career.
That's very true. So since Vicky answered the question, I'd like a fellow panelist to also answer the same question, and it's in the chat, but I'll read it out too. Again, it says that given the push for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the need for diverse leadership, what would you say to students of color who are currently matriculating in public administration programs? And I'm right here to take it in, so please pour it out, because I need this.
Do you mind? Absolutely. I mean, being a Puerto Rican kid born and raised in Newark, I service, kids that are, the kids of people I grew up with. So I truly understand the needs of the community. I was one of the kids that was serviced by the organization that I serve as the executive director of now. And I would tell people that are matriculating in it to go into it full force. There are opportunities there to make tangible changes in the community. Don't be scared. I mean, I know, people get afraid of the nonprofit sector thinking, oh, people that work at the nonprofits, they'll never make money, whatever, blah, 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 blah. There are opportunities to make a very good living. But the other thing that's a flip side that you really can't get in the, at the same level in the private sector is the rewarding nature of the job. Like I said, one of the reasons why I decided to work in nonprofit and stay in nonprofits my career, even leaving government, was that, if you can develop stuff, you can come up with an idea. I've created programs from an idea and a conversation that I've had, and then utilizing connections through networks, through various organizations I'm a part of, I was able to secure funding to be able to create something based on conversations I've had with people in the community that needed the help, to be able to impact them directly and to watch it happen every single day and to see it, number one, create jobs. And we always hire from the community. So we're hiring people right in the neighborhoods, and then they're providing services to people that need it in the neighborhoods. So just to see all of that, to me, is like, you don't get that from creating widgets or doing something else that, maybe more lucrative. You can create 10 million more widgets, make more money, but you don't get to see that impact on that kid that, someday is going to take my job and take it to the organization to bigger heights. Somebody that's going to go out there and impact other people's lives. I'll use a quote from Tupac Shakur. I don't want to be the one that makes the change, but maybe I can spark the one that will make the change. And I'm sorry, I can go on for a long time about that.
Listen, I was here to take it all in.
There's a Tupac quote for you, middle Hispanic heritage. I'm sorry, so.
Yeah, really. I actually have heard that quotation before, and many other very inspiring quotations from Tupac. He's a legend in our place. But I guess, Professor, the very same question from Dean Manifield.
Sure. I think I tell all of my students to come in my classroom basically that your voice is valuable and your ideas matter. And I think the same thing goes to students of color. One thing that I didn't say about myself is that I am lesbian. I identify as a lesbian Latina. I'm also third generation Mexican American. And I had a different upbringing from most people in my community. So I very much grew up with my family really putting in the concept of culture while also knowing my language. But I grew up speaking English all through my education, really. So I have a very different lens that I come into my career and my interests. And I think the important thing is I would tell students, don't be afraid to kind of trailblaze. I didn't have any classmates who were really of Hispanic background growing up, and most of my younger education, even through college, really, and that became even more apparent when I got into an MPA program and PhD program. I was the only Latina throughout my whole PhD program, and I was very fortunate to maybe meet one or two other individuals who identified in Latinx throughout my time, really, when I was going through my program. And I think if I had let that hold me back, I wouldn't be here today. And I think representation matters, but I think it's also important to recognize that you don't need that to be here. So if you have the passion and you have the ability and you're very motivated, go for it. The worst thing that can happen is you're going to fail, but guess what? You tried. And that's important, especially for leading other future Latinx community individuals to get into these spaces. And then it's also an opportunity for you to just give back more, because people who finally get to interact with you, even if you failed at some point, are going to have some respect from where you come from and your values and what you have to bring to the table.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you all so much. I just wanted to pass a comment on the point of diversity. The based on the third question, and I can't remember this entirely vividly, but from one of my internships that I was doing, I was assigned to listen to a hearing, and the hearing was really focused on, right now after what happened to George Floyd, a lot of private and public, I guess, companies we were like, we're in for diversity, inclusion, and equity. We're in for it, and we're even gonna put our money on it. But we saw over time that their words did not match up. It wasn't connecting. So the Senate, I think it was like the House and Financial Committee, I think, decided to just have a hearing based on why things, why they said, they're going to focus on diversity, inclusion, and equity, but it's not really reflecting. And in the hearing, and here's the twist, and it really got me, I'm not gonna lie. In the hearing, they had a lot of course, what are they called? Testifiers, I think so. They have people who just come and just say their piece and say their part. And it's a particular lady who represented a particular company, a consultation company of diversity inclusion. And at the end of her entire presentation, which I felt was really good, the question that Senator Waters asked her is that, why is it that at your executive level you don't have any representation, you don't have any type of diversity, you don't have, it's all the white male people, and you're here telling us all these beautiful things about diversity and inclusion of your clients, but your particular company doesn't have that at all. And I think that's when that's really when Vicky said her part, that definitely got me, because I really was surprised. I did not see that coming from her company, the way she was speaking and giving solutions. So I think one of my main points from this particular point story that I'm telling is that that people's words are powerful as well, but also action matters. And I think like we who are working in nonprofits, we're putting the action in, definitely. But we also have to notice that even in our impact also has to be diverse. And I think like that especially by gender, of course, and by perhaps race. But I think that was really important to find out that her company did not have any type of diversity and inclusion in her executive part, but she was given all these type of solutions. And I was so nervous as to what have I been listening on social media? What have I been supporting through social media? Because the words are amazing, but the actions are not following up. And I think that the program that the MPF program provides to us is to be the solution to that challenge. Is to go in there and say, look, I have the degree, but I also have the capability to bring diversity, inclusion, and answers and solution into your spaces. And I think like you three are just really inspiring that type of conversation to happen. So it just might happen. I don't know, maybe Director Sher put something like that together. But I just was very mindful of that particular point when you all were talking, especially when it comes to news like that. Okay, my follow-up question, we'll just go with Director Stroy. Her question here in the comments, it says that the academy, which is higher education, how do we create opportunities and supports the increase the numbers of Latinx representation? So anybody could go. We could ask Carlos actually. Let me shoot the question. Carlos, you can go first.
Sure, I think creating a pipeline and introducing what the sector is like to young people in the community. Growing up, normally the kids, they see the drug dealers on the corner, they idolize them, they see them, and a lot of it has to do with accessibility and what they see. I think getting people in the nonprofit sector doing community work literally out there and interacting with the community, interacting with young people, going to the high schools, going into the elementary schools and show them, hey, these are some of the things that we do. And these are some of the things that you can aspire to do as well. And being innovative when it comes to that. not just career day, but take advantage of the work that you do. When you work in the nonprofit sector, you're interacting with a lot of these entities anyway. So take the opportunity to promote it by being that example that kids can see and aspire to.
That's true. That's very true. Thank you so much. Vicky?
So I think one of the big things is to first examine the culture within the organization that you're trying to bring people into. So often we hear about, the great example that Anna gave us about this company that was bragging about this diversity, equity, and inclusion work that they wanted to do, yet their organization themselves was filled with white leaders. So looking at the environment that you want to bring people into, because there's nothing worse than saying you want to do all of this work, bringing someone in, and then having an environment where they're not really welcomed or wanted. So really examining the culture within your own organization and examining how your own organization upholds white supremacy and a white supremacy culture. And those words can be really a little too harsh for some people to hear. They hear white supremacy culture and they picture, okay, everyone's having meetings with hoods on, and that's what your board meeting looks like. No, there are little things within an organization, as our professor pointed out. The family is so important to the Latinx community, that family structure and the family unit. If you have an organization that doesn't understand that maybe I need to take a day off to take care of my sick mother, and that should count as part of my sick time or vacation time, then they're not understanding the culture, right? And that all fits into white supremacist culture, not prioritizing the family unit or understanding the values of the cultures beyond white culture. So really looking into those things, I think, are one of the first things that we can do. And then the second thing, I think, is just be bold and do it. There are so many times where, I've even seen in the business school where there's invite-only panels or invite-only committees or meetings or opportunities. Bring the Latinx student with you, like bring multiple Latinx people with you, invite those Latinx speakers, like make sure that they're getting access to the academy that their white peers are getting. And don't just put the opportunity out there and say, Latinx people applied or no people of color, but do the work, be bold, make the effort, be intentional. Like all of that has to be done in order for this to really be an integrated environment.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Vicky. Professor?
No, I completely agree with my colleagues on the panel. I think another thing is to become integrated in the community early on. Like I mentioned, I'm from Arizona, and I was very fortunate to be a part of a nonprofit called Aguila Youth Leadership Institute. And it's run by a fantastic woman, Rosemary Hernandez. She is really focused on helping high school students very early on learn how to get into colleges and universities, because it is a very confusing thing, and families don't understand FAFSA very well. They don't understand these intricacies. There are things that unless you have some knowledge and education, you have no idea that you should be doing pre-SAT courses or practicing for ACTs and SATs or doing things differently, that there are privileged individuals and communities who understand that. And so there are nonprofit organizations and communities, and I think being able to partner with them so that you bring the youth, you bring people from underrepresented communities. Aguila Youth Leadership started by focusing on the Latinx community out in Arizona and helping them get into higher education and being able to progress further. But it's also progressed even further from that to include other individuals from underrepresented communities. And that is really where you start, because if you miss that opportunity early on, it's really hard to kind of be able to push that in there. And she also works with trying to, educate family members on the importance of this higher education route and what type of opportunities are there for their children and why that's important. So I think what my colleagues are saying is very important, but the focus of integrating communities, which is why nonprofits are so important for universities, because they're really integrated within the neighborhoods and the people, and they get word spread. This is why it's so important, and this is how you are able to focus on highlighting why an MPA matters, why looking at futuristic careers within becoming an executive leader is important, so that you can help the next generation behind you.
Yes, yes. Definitely. I feel like I'm even like a testimony of access. That even Director Story so I mean, right now I'm having access, which I'm so privileged for. But you know, access is awesome. Director Story would send me information, and during my undergrad, when I expressed interest in public administration, but I wasn't so sure, and she would send me information to come and check it out myself. You know, so it's like providing that the pathway to access, or even providing directly the access, really gives students the energy, the purpose, the mindset to go after what they believe they can create in this world. So I think I am literally a testimony here. So thank you so much. And even as the president of the Public Administration Graduate Association, that I think that is one of the main things that we will be focused on now, is to diversify our panelists. I don't think we really thought of that, but I think now we're definitely going to look deeper into that. So I'm telling you right now that you are literally impacting me as I moderate, because I think I have so much to learn. I'm so happy that this is an opportunity that has been presented to me. This is an access that the entire audience, you know, has been privileged with. So thank you. Okay, so I do want to ask our last question before we look into a final question on the chat as well. But I really want to know your response on this. And maybe we'll just combine them both. So we're going to do two together. It's going to be like an A and B. And I'm so sorry. Our professors did this to me. Blame the professors. They did this. So my A question is, what are the challenges of creating the next generation of executive leaders in nonprofit sector? And my B question is, what advice would you give to students seeking leadership position in nonprofit sector? I feel like we already touched on it, but we would just like your final advice before we enter the last question. Your final advice, and probably I like ask for like a final advice. So just hold on to a final, but but we do want to have an advice just based on a nonprofit, and we just ask for like a general advice to all students. So yes, so that's the A question. The A question is challenges. What are the challenges of creating the next generation of executive leaders in nonprofit sector? And the B question is, you know, an advice to students who are seeking leadership positions in nonprofit sectors.
I'm happy to go first on this one. So the challenges, I think, of creating the next generation of executives in the nonprofit sector that's not really the challenge, I don't think. We've been creating executives for generations. I think to be creating more diverse, more mindful, more intentional leadership, there's going to be some things we need to change. And one of them, I'm going to go back to like that white supremacy culture that is a barrier so often, bureaucracy that is a barrier so often to making changes, especially in really large institutions. It really hampers agility and the ability for organizations to be responsive to the needs of the groups that they're working with. We really need to examine these things within organizations if we're going to change anything, because so often you have search committees that are constantly picking the same person, the same type of person over and over again, and they're using excuses that are things like, well, this person had more experience with this, but we really do care about diversity. We just couldn't hire this other person because they didn't have any experience with X, Y, and Z. Well, maybe X, Y, and Z is only a small part of what the work is really about. Spend the money and help that person gain that experience. Like, if you really care, then do it. I'm tired of the lip service. I could rant about this forever, so I'll hold back a little bit. But I think that's really the challenge. It's that bureaucracy, it's that wall, it's the imaginary constraints that people put on themselves. And once you have power, I really implore people to think about what imaginary constraints are there and what do they really have power to change? What can they do to make things better? I find myself doing that all the time in my role. And sometimes, and this is also advice to students as well, sometimes you only have the littlest bit of power, right? Use it, grab it, leverage it. Anna, you just talked, I love what you just said about diversifying the speakers that you have coming into PAGA. By the way, former PAGA leader myself, so woot woot, yes, thank you. but thinking about that power that you have, you're a student. You have that power in that role. And some students might say, oh, I have no power to change. Yeah, you just found an opportunity right there. So even if it's you're throwing events on campus and you want to bring in more diverse suppliers, that's the power that you have, leverage it. Whatever you can, leverage it. And advice to students, I would say, be bold and just do it. One of the beautiful things about this sector is that there is such a variety of opportunities for you. There are so many small nonprofits that would love a young board member, even if you don't have a lot of experience. So go after those opportunities and be bold. Reach out to the people that you get to know, that you come across as a student, especially. The one thing I miss about being a student are all of the opportunities that are just put in front of you, and you don't even realize you have a buffet of opportunity in front of you, and the blinders are on, you're not seeing it. Like, make sure you're looking at each one of those chances. Reach out to people on LinkedIn after they come to speak, send them an email and say thank you, follow their work, check out some articles, and reach out to the people you see there. So just be bold. That's my final advice.
Thank you so much. I know we have 3 minutes on, but I just wanted to give a heads up on the time. But yes, we're still going to hear from everybody, representation, please. Yeah, I guess Professor can go next.
Yeah, no, I think Vicky just hit it perfectly. And I think when I think about executive leaders, I really think about the board, because the board is essentially going to make the decisions for how the CEOs and presidents are going to be leading that nonprofit organization. And so until those boards look representative of the communities and the diversity that's there, it's really going to be difficult for the nonprofit organizations to follow, because essentially in the world of nonprofit organizations, the board of directors are going to lead and focus on where the efforts need to be for a nonprofit. Really, the executive leaders can only do so much when we have those constraints legally in the sense of how we're organizing things. But to tie in essentially some of the advice, and I think this ties into Natalie Hernandez's question in the chat, is really, I think it's not uncommon to feel kind of out there in the sense of imposter syndrome. I think it's something that hits everyone at different points in their careers. And I think it kind of goes back to the ability to reach out. Mentorship is important. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who looks like you or has a similar background. My advice would be reach out. Like, LinkedIn is a wonderful service to kind of use to just randomly kind of cold message people, and you'd be surprised the people who will respond. Getting involved specifically with nonprofits with an association called Arnova. They include practitioners and researchers involved, and you can get a lot of information from individuals there on how you can make failures and to how you can become successful, and people are willing to share their own experiences. So I think take advantage. What Vicky was saying, learn all that you can with all the possibilities that are in front of you right now, because realistically, I mean, I feel like if I could go back to my undergrad, I would have done like a million things that I didn't think about now, that are opportunities, and even in my master's program, that I would have completely and totally tried, even if I thought I was so uncomfortable with them or it wouldn't work out. So I think just don't be afraid to make mistakes or to feel like you're putting yourself out there in an awkward moment. Just try things, reach out, learn all that you can. It doesn't matter if you're going to end up using it or not, you're going to learn those skill sets and you can apply it to anything. So really just kind of focus on thinking about what you would like to see just generally in the future or in the nonprofit sector, and then just try and find your route to get to that, whatever that may be.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And Carlos, I guess you could also like just kind of answer Natalia.
I'll give a quick version, but basically, I mean, we know there are a lot of challenges and obstacles. One of the challenges would be accessibility to opportunities. But as far as the advice that I would give to the students or to those looking to get involved, I would say don't be afraid to volunteer, right? Volunteer at all levels, whether you're watching the front desk, whether you're tutoring, whether you're working and helping the fiscal person with the budget. Don't be afraid to volunteer and get to learn different aspects of the organization, because in talking to those people that are on the ground level doing the work, you can really get a feel for the organization, and you can get the feel for the type of work in terms of what's also effective. And when you get the opportunity to become a leader, that input is invaluable. The other advice I would give is communication. Not only, learning, how to write and how to communicate orally and being able to speak and represent as well, but being able to write is important because you can get funding, you can communicate and spread your message. You can put yourself out there through very good writing and communication skills, but communication is a two-way street. So also learning to listen is very critical. So just to sum it up, I would say volunteer, learn to communicate, and definitely with an emphasis on learn how to listen. Because in speaking with not only the workers of the organization, but the constituents, that is huge. As the executive director, to this day, I speak with constituents. And that's how you know if you're doing a great job, but that's also how you know what the community really needs. Sometimes when people are in executive situations, especially if they're there for a long time, you kind of lose a little bit of touch. And the needs of a community can change very quickly. And if you're still stuck on a certain way of doing things, the community and the entire needs of the area can just change you by and render your organization ineffective. So definitely communication is a very important skill that I would recommend everybody have.
Thank you so much. And Vicky, we do want you to answer, just try to answer Natalie's question in the chat for us for like a minute.
Yeah, well, I want to just quickly piggyback on what Carlos just said about volunteering. It's a long story, but I can tell you that where I am right now as an acting executive director is directly linked to me setting up a Christmas holiday event at a local hospital for children as a high school student. I promise you, I can make that connection. And that was as a volunteer student leader in high school. So yes, a part of your boldness is taking those opportunities and then leveraging them. Like taking responsibility for something while you're in those volunteer opportunities is such a good way to be able to grow. Take responsibility for taking over the social media or help to make their flyers, and then just keep building, leverage that. If I can leverage setting up a Santa visit at a high school to get where I am right now, I promise you can do it with some real leadership opportunities that are out for young people today. I think what my fellow panelists have shared already about imposter syndrome is so valuable. One thing I want to also add to that conversation is remember that the system was designed this way. The system was designed to make you feel little. The system was designed to make you feel excluded. It was designed to keep a certain group of people in power. And remember that you're not just a person who's been underrepresented in leadership, but you've been historically intentionally excluded from leadership as a marginalized identity. And so some of that has helped me to check my own imposter syndrome, which I still battle with all the time. So when I frame it in my mind as like, oh, I'm fighting white supremacy and colonialism by rejecting these feelings and like putting them into a framework, I feel pretty badass when I'm doing that. It makes me feel better about those feelings I have. So I hope that is helpful advice for someone else. And Natalie, also, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to connect you. I know Dean Stroy also shared her contact information, but I'd love to connect you to the Nonprofit Professionals of Color Collective, because I think having mentorship and representatives who have experienced what you have or who are dealing with these same challenges could be helpful to you. And we have members that are as young as students in their undergrads all the way through people who have decades of experience.
Thank you so much. I feel like I would love this to literally keep repeating the cycle because of how much I've learned and how awesome you all were. I truly believe that all of you just pretty much spoke from your heart, just giving us real answers to real questions. And I feel like most of them have really impacted me, and I'm already making changes in my mind as the conversation was going on. I just want to thank our audience as well for sticking with us. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Your questions were awesome. If you have any follow-up questions, you can reach out to us through, I guess, our email on our website or through Facebook or wherever you might, or even I think we also have Instagram. So you can probably DM us on Instagram and we would do our absolute best to get our panelists to answer those questions via email, or, you know, if they just answer, we just return it back to you. No problem. We will take the efforts to make sure that your question is represented. I really want to thank each and every one of you, our panelists. You are all awesome. And I know that I'm definitely going to keep in touch. I mean, I have my professor here, so I'm going, but I know that I'm definitely going to keep in touch with both of you, because I think Paga needs your voices as well back into these spaces. And so with our professor. So I believe that Paga will probably just call y'all back in. Just you know, shady throw over there. But I just truly want to say thank you so much. Follow us on social media, on our spa page. Follow us on LinkedIn as well if you have LinkedIn. And yes, once again, thank you. I just feel like I just want to keep thanking you all because of how awesome the information was. I should pay $1,000,000 for this, but you all just made it so beautiful. And thank you so much for speaking from your heart. Yes, thank you for this wonderful program. And thank you, Director Story, for putting this together.
Good night, everyone.
All right, good night, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night. Thank you all. Have a